Good morning everybody, welcome to Sunday's edition of Indycar. My name's Gordon Ross and today's little programme doesn't have a specific title, nor really does it have a specific subject, just one or two things which have come to my attention in the last few days. I titled the start of this programme Reshuffling. Now reshuffling is the way that Prime Ministers get rid of underperforming ministers and try to bring in people who are more competent to their jobs to try and make the government more effective. But this reshuffle that's coming up in the next few days for the Tory party is rather a critical one, because people like David Davis, who is the Minister for exiting the EU, his job is currently hanging by a thread, because it's well known in at least Westminster circles that David Davis is not thought to be doing a particularly good job over in Brussels negotiating our Brexit, and it's thought, and rumours are flying around all over the place at the moment, that his job will soon be gone and he will be out of the picture. Now what happens after that is very important, because if, as everybody expects, he is replaced by a hardline Brexiteer, then that casts the whole of the Brexit negotiations in a completely different light. Because rather than going for the best possible deal and trying to get a softer option, a softer Brexit, it looks more likely that a hard Brexiteer will be put in his place. Now, some people have mentioned Boris Johnson being moved sideways from his extremely poorly cast performance as the Foreign Secretary, where he has done nothing but insult and upset the people that he's supposed to be talking to. And he had a very bad car crash interview and meeting in Moscow with their foreign minister a few days ago, in which he stumbled all the way through it and actually accomplished zero in terms of gaining anybody's respect. In fact, Sergei Lavrov, who is the Russian foreign minister, couldn't understand Boris Johnson's position at all, and in fact ridiculed him afterwards for a terrifyingly inept performance. So imagine if Boris Johnson is moved into the position of Brexit negotiator, or the leader of the Brexit negotiating team. Imagine what that will do to everybody's expectations of the deal, because it seems to me that what's happening in the Tory party, which is an internal battle between hard Brexiteers and those who never wanted Brexit in the first place but are now having to put up with it, is gradually being won by the hard Brexiteers of the right. Now, whether you agree with Brexit or not, the fact is that having a Tory negotiator who wants out of Europe and doesn't want to deal is a very dangerous situation for the whole United Kingdom, and particularly for Scottish exporters. So nobody really knows what's going to happen next, but the fact that there's actually very little news on at the moment, if you tuned into the BBC News or ITN News today, you would discover that the big news story is the fact that there's not going to be any fox hunting vote. Now, this is a non-story. The fact that Theresa May has decided not to give people a vote on fox hunting, to reverse the existing ban, is basically saying we're not doing anything. And this is suddenly a piece of major news, that the government is not doing anything about the fox hunting ban that already exists. That just goes to show you how little is actually being done by anybody at this moment in time, and how little the BBC and ITV want us to know about what's actually going on in the background with the Tory party. So while all that is going on, I discovered this week that the viewing figures for this programme have now started to exceed the audience figures for Good Morning Scotland on BBC Radio Scotland, something which I had never noticed before, and somebody pointed out to me this week that the viewing figures for BBC Scotland and for listening figures for Radio Scotland, I am now starting to approach those numbers or exceed them on Indycar, which I think is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's wonderful, but it's just so unbelievable. I was taken aback this weekend when somebody mentioned this to me. Now, what's the point of me sort of mentioning this at the moment? Well, the point is that if this little show, with what I'm doing, is starting to gain more traction than the BBC, then that just goes to show you that the pendulum is beginning to swing back the other way. We've had nothing but British news, or I should say English news, really, what they want us to hear. It's all been SNP doing a bad job, Scottish NHS underperforming in some way. In fact, we all know that the Scottish NHS is outperforming every other single part of the United Kingdom's health service, and it's doing that for the simple reason that we haven't underfunded it. The Scottish Government is making sure that the Scottish NHS is funded at least enough to keep it running in its current form without it contracting. Whereas in England, the Tories have cut it back and cut it back and cut it back to the point where people are dying because they're waiting 4 hours for an ambulance. It's what happened yesterday. A lady in England somewhere waited 4 hours for an ambulance and died before it could reach her. Now, this is not the fault of the ambulance service. It's the fact that there's not enough ambulances and not enough crews and not enough money in the system to make it work for everybody. So, the point about the media now is that in Scotland, social media is now exceeding the audience figures for mainstream. Now, this is a big moment. This is a historical moment for anybody, not just for this show. My friend and co-presenter on a couple of other shows, Mark McNaught, who is Assistant Professor of Political Science at the University of Rennes, he recently started his own video programme, and on his first show, he hit over 11,000 views. Now, that also tells you that people are fed up watching the BBC and they're turning to good social media programmes for proper information about something which is really happening, about a new constitution which is being written as we speak for the Scottish people, and with the Scottish people's input. Unlike any other part of the United Kingdom, in this country, the people are sovereign. They are the ones who make the laws and make the decisions. And what Dr. Mark McNaught was doing was inviting people to look at what he's already prepared and what his friend, I believe his name is Elliot, over at Commonweal, who's another professor of political science, what the two of them and many other people are working on in Scotland at the moment is drafting the new Scottish Constitution, the document which will form the underpinnings of a new state, and that gives us all rights and responsibilities as citizens, something which in the United Kingdom we don't have. In the United Kingdom we are subjects of the Queen, of the monarchy. The monarchy is second only to Westminster, which is supreme. Now, Westminster, as we know, is not representative of the Scots, because if we were really in an equal union, then we would have 300 MPs, not 50 odd. We would have 300. We would have roughly the same as England, roughly the same as Wales, roughly the same as Northern Ireland. Everybody would have equal representation if it were a union of equals, but it isn't, as we know. So the situation at the moment is rather interesting. The Scottish media now in terminal decline. Newspaper circulations are falling dramatically. Every single year, newspaper circulations have dropped. And every single year, the BBC's viewing figures have dropped as well. Ever since 2014, and ever since the media was held responsible for spreading lies, negative stories, and actually not being impartial during the independence referendum at all, people have deserted them in droves. People have, by the tens of thousands, stopped paying their licence fees as well. But what's lovely is when I go anywhere now, if I go even just to a small town hall meeting, or I go on a march, I'm crowded with people who are all saying to me, it's great what you're doing, and you've helped me to convert my parents to voting yes in the next referendum. Now, interestingly, I got a message yesterday from a gentleman who, I don't need to name him, but he said he was a keen viewer who watched the show every week, or in fact virtually every day, and enjoyed it greatly. And then he went on to say to me that he was not a supporter of independence, he was also a Brexiteer, but he enjoyed the show and he thought that it was good. Now, if that sort of person, a person who normally I would class as a political opponent, is watching the programme, that must tell you something about the way I'm trying to deliver the news. Now, I put a positive spin on it when I'm supporting independence, and I tell people that I'm not being impartial, because I'm not. You know, I will make a comment because I support independence, but I'll tell you that I do support it and I'm making a political comment. I'm being a polemicist. If I'm giving news, and I'm giving it impartially, then I'll be professional about it, and I'll tell you the truth, and I'll research it properly, and I'll phone people up, and I'll fact check. If I make a mistake in any of my broadcasts, people will call me or they'll text me and say, look, you made a mistake. And if it's a bad mistake and it's misleading, then I will create another programme almost immediately and make a public apology and make a correction. Now, this is something which the mainstream media never does. It takes months to respond to any kind of complaint, and it never apologises for anything unless it's a colossal mistake that millions of people complain about. Social media has the ability to be far more agile than any other kind of TV media, simply because it can be made quickly, it doesn't require scripting, it doesn't require an awful lot of staff to do it, and it is very much grassroots. I'm not sitting in a studio getting paid a fortune to tell you anything. I'm sitting in a car at the side of the road in the West End of Glasgow doing this because I think it's important. Anyway, back to news stories. As I said, it's a very slow period for news at the moment, partly because nothing very much is happening in politics just now, because the politicians are not working at the moment, not back in session yet. They have very long holidays. So not much is happening. And the things which are happening tend to be to do with things like crime or things like fox hunting. So the kind of day-to-day items that you see on the news. There's nothing very big going on, except for one thing, and that is, you probably noticed this, that Angela Merkel in Germany is having a great deal of difficulty forming a government. Nobody seems to want to talk to her anymore. Her centrist parties around her, with whom she normally forms alliances with to create government, no longer have her respect. And this is all simply because she decided to open the borders, or open Germany's borders, to hundreds of thousands of migrants and refugees. Now, was it the wrong thing to do, or was it a humanitarian thing to do? Well, there's always arguments about both of these things. But the fact is now that Europeans are scared now. They're scared of immigration, and it's been suggested that some other countries might want to leave the EU in the same way that the United Kingdom is, because they're also worried about being overwhelmed by the refugee crisis, which has largely been created by both America and Western Europe, by all our interference in the Middle East. So we've created a problem which is now kicking back at us, and when you create enemies and you force people out of their homes by bombing them out, you can't really turn around and say, well, we're not going to let you into our country because we're full up. You've actually caused these people to be homeless in the first place. And I think maybe if Angela Merkel did something a little bit more concrete about finding homes or finding ways for these people to be able to return home to Syria, maybe starting dialogue with Assad about rebuilding people's homes and stopping the fighting. I mean, as far as I'm aware, the Russians have finished clearing out ISIS from Syria. The only fighting that is still going on is between Assad's forces and the forces of the Free Syrian Army. And maybe also some Kurdish PKK fighters as well. But the point is, it's time Assad and Europe found a way to peacefully resolve the situation in Syria and allow people to return home and rebuild their lives. It's not about where these people end up because they've been displaced. It's about getting them back home and helping them to rebuild their lives that's important. If Europe concentrated more on that and less on shutting them out, then perhaps people would have more sympathy for the likes of Angela Merkel. Anyway, those are the news items I've noticed recently, and as I said, the shock of finding out that Indycar is becoming more popular than Good Morning Scotland really set me back a little bit this weekend. But as I say, I view it as a turning point, and I hope that it continues for the next maybe a year or two as we are fighting towards this next independence referendum and winning it. And being prepared this time, having a currency ready, having our constitution written and ready to be signed up by the Parliament as soon as we get that yes vote. Because if we're prepared this time, and we have our constitution and our currency and our central bank and everything ready to go, then we know what we're asking people to vote for, and they know what they're voting for. It's not just a wish list anymore, it becomes a reality. And once it's a reality, people will buy into it because it's a far more attractive reality than Brexit, Tory austerity for maybe the next 2 decades while Britain tries to claw its way back into the marketplace in the world economy. So I'm hoping that Indycar, Independence Live, and Mark McNaught's new show about the Constitution, all of these things and many other bloggers and vloggers and presenters will come forward and help to make social media into the new Scottish media, because it's happening now. If 50% of viewers are now viewing IndyCar and 50% are left viewing, say, Good Morning Scotland or Kay Adams, then we're starting to win. We started with nothing, remember. We have no media initially, and during the first independence referendum we had nothing. Everything was against us. We had no newspapers except perhaps one, and it was a Sunday paper. We had no TV channels. Now we've got Alex Salmond with his own show. We've got this little show. We've got Independence Live, who go out live every day somewhere, covering all kinds of independence events all over the country. And we've got people like Mark McNaught and other people in Commonweal, all coming out of the woodwork now and starting to appear in social media shows, giving facts and telling people they can interact with them and they can make their points and have them included in the work that's being done as a preparation for the next referendum. Anyway, I'm off. I've got to go and do some actual work now, but I hope you have a pleasant Sunday and I look forward to speaking to you tomorrow. But keep your powder dry, don't panic, everything will be alright. We have a lot of work to do, but when I say we, I don't mean just me, I mean you guys as well. You need to get involved with shows like mine and with Independence Live and any other social media shows which allow you to interact. Get out there and do things, organise marches. Bridges for Indy is another great success by Dave Llewellyn, which is keeping people aware of the fact that independence support is growing. Even just putting flags on bridges keeps reminding people that we're here, we haven't died off, and we're growing. More yes badges in cars, I'm starting to see more and more of them again. Yes 2 badges appearing all over the place, stickers everywhere. All these things, keep it in people's minds. And that's how we win these kinds of battles. We keep our narrative going. We keep drumming it into people. It's going to happen. It's going to be done properly this time. The answers are there. The institutions will be there. You're not going to be voting for a wish list this time. You're going to be voting for something that's real, and it'll be ready to go, and we'll hit the ground running as soon as we get that yes vote. Anyway, I'm off. Have a pleasant day. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Bye for now.